Hi everyone, welcome to the first Nodal webinar. This webinar is really focused on resellers, so I'm not even going to bother introducing myself. You probably know me by now. I'm also not going to give you my elevator pitch on what Accept.Blue is, because you should all probably be very familiar with what we are. Instead, these sessions, these Nodal sessions, this one is the first one, are going to be very, very focused, and they're going to be pretty intense, with the objective of getting you guys to really understand the feature inside and out without taking too long, too much of your time. So hang on to your seats. It's going to be full details. I want you guys to be able to walk away really, really understanding each feature as we go through it. So like I said, this is the start of a new series for all the new features that we push out, all the exciting stuff we do. I think this is one of the most, maybe the most important new product or new process that we have, because we can have the most amazing features and the coolest stuff, but if our resellers, who are the in between us and the merchant, don't really understand what the platform is capable of, then those features just go unnoticed, unused, unsupported. So getting you guys to really understand it, to be able to support it, to be able to sell it, I think is critical. So I'm very appreciative of everybody that took time of their day to join this webinar and our future know-it-all webinars. Like I said, this is not going to take a long time. My intention is to get you guys in and out well within 30 minutes, hopefully more in the 15 to 20-minute range, but you'll be walking away with a whole new understanding of the feature that we're going to be covering. Today, we're going to start with invoicing. It's a built-in invoicing tool to every gateway account that a merchant has. The ability for the merchant to send out an invoice via email or text message to their customer. Customer gets the link, sees the invoice details, and pays over the invoice. That's the basic idea. We see this feature being used across different industries. It's really hard to say this industry uses invoicing, but this one doesn't. From professional services to B2B to nonprofits, a lot of different verticals are using the invoicing tool. So it covers a lot of bases. I'm not even going to get down to what merchant to sell it to, which one's not. Almost every merchant can benefit from the ability to send out a link to a customer and request payments. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen so you guys can actually see the invoicing tool. We're going to go through it start to finish. There's going to be time at the end for question and answers. If anybody has, hold on to that question. We'll get to hopefully most of them at the end of the session. It is being recorded, so if you have to walk away for a minute, we will post it on our YouTube channel. Let's go ahead and start sharing. Okay, I'm logged into my merchant gateway account as a sample merchant, as a sandbox merchant. We're going to go ahead and navigate over to that invoicing tab. So we're going to start with creating an invoice, and then we're going to look at some of the settings or configurations that are involved with the invoicing tool. So step one, click on new invoice, top right corner. And there's going to be a lot of information over here that you know already, but I can almost guarantee that there's going to be plenty of information that even agents or resellers or users that are familiar with the invoicing tool will find to be new. I also have a special surprise planned, a new feature that we just rolled out in honor of this webinar. So stay focused, please. All right, let's go ahead and select the customer. You can have more than one email over here, so I'm just going to put 2 emails. You can see you just separate them by a comma and space, and we're going to go ahead, skip over those customer details, but that's all available if you want to add more information. And we're going to come to the invoice details section. This is where you can have an invoice number. You can put in your own invoice number, or you can let the system auto increment. So every time you create a new invoice, it moves on to the next number. So the next one will end in 76, 77, 78, etc. This is the invoice date, and then you've got your invoice due date, when the invoice is actually due. You can change that. Of course, you can make 30, 60, 90, or you can put in a custom amount of days after which the invoice will become due for the customer. Moving on, we'll get to the actual line item. So this is where we add products. Now, I'm going to show you how to actually create categories with products using our inventory system. But for now, I'm going to use one of the products that we've already created. So instead of adding a new product, which I can do by just typing, I'm going to instead click on choose product. And once I click on choose product, I'm going to get this pop-up where I have multiple categories, all the categories that I created along with their corresponding product. So I'm going to choose my no category here, and I'm going to choose some of these products. I don't know who on my team actually created these products. They are absolutely wild. They make no sense, but for the purpose of this invoice, we can definitely use it for the purpose of this webinar. Really creative products, whoever created it. If you're watching this, we'll go ahead and put that and add this to the invoice. So I've got all my products here ready because I've chosen them from my product categories, from my inventory system. So I've got my product name, my description, the price, and we're going to scroll down and move on to the totals. So here I've got the option to add a discount. When I click on add discount, I can set it as a % discount or as a set amount. If a merchant wants to take $10 off an invoice or $20 off an invoice, they can do that. We're just going to use the percentage. So we'll say we're going to put a $10% discount over here. I'm going to click on apply, and you can see that discount is now $21.45. And then I can edit how much is actually required on this invoice. So by default, when a merchant sends an invoice, 100% of that invoice is going to be required. But I can click on that little pencil and edit and say, I only want to require 50% of my invoice. Or again, I can say I only want to require $50 out of my invoice or $100 out of my invoice. And then I could just apply that. So again, we'll do 50%. We'll click apply. And now only $99.43 is actually going to be required. At any time, I could always just, remove that, and I won't have any percentage that's specifically required. The entire invoice will be required. Okay, before we actually move on to sending the invoice, you can see there's a drop down here called action. It's by default set to charge. And what this means is when the customer makes a payment for this invoice, it'll run the transaction as a regular charge. So it'll put the transaction in the current batch. And when that batch closes, that transaction will settle. You do, as the merchant, have the option to choose authorize as the action, which means that when the customer makes the payment on this invoice, it will not run the transaction as a charge. Instead, it'll run the transaction as an authorized transaction only, as an auth only. So it will not be in the current batch. It will not settle when the batch closes. Instead, it'll sit in what we call our queue tab, where all the auth-only transactions sit, and then the merchant can log into their gateway, either capture that transaction, void it, or if the merchant does neither, it'll expire after a set number of days. So those are the two options. Again, by default, it'll sit as charge. You can add notes if you want that to be displayed to the customer. You can add terms and conditions as well. I've already set default terms and conditions, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So my terms are already sitting here, but let's go ahead and click on that send button, bottom right corner. And here I've got my email addresses. You can add as many as you'd like. Every time you add an email address, just hit enter so that email address saves. I can also add cell phone numbers. So we're going to go ahead and enter a cell phone number. Again, just hit enter so that cell phone number saves. Again, you can add as many as you want, and we'll send the link to those emails and those cell phone numbers if you put them in. You can edit the subject and the content, the body of the email right here. Again, I've already set these as my default, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But because that's already set as my default, that's already sitting here. And finally, what I can do is attach any files I'd like to. So PDF, Word, picture attachments, whatever the merchant wants to attach, they can, just by clicking on the Add Files button and then, clicking on those attachments from their computer files. The checkbox over here of Attach System Invoice is by default checked off. And what that means is that every invoice that's sent via email will automatically by default come with a PDF invoice. Besides for the link, which the customer will click on to make that payment, the email will also have a PDF attachment with the invoice details and the total amounts. If the merchant does not want that PDF to be sent, all they need to do is uncheck that checkbox, and we won't send that PDF. We're ready to send. We're going to go ahead and send that. We'll get a confirmation that those emails and that text message was sent correctly. And now I've come to my invoice dashboard over here, and I see this invoice that I just sent. The status is dynamic, which means it changes as actions are taken, as time goes on. Right now, the invoice that we just created and sent has a status of sent. But once I actually click on that link, it'll be updated to viewed. So as the merchant, I know that my customer has already clicked on the link. They've already seen the invoice. And then as time goes on, hopefully it gets paid. If it doesn't get paid, eventually it gets that little red exclamation point, which shows you that it's overdue. And the merchant can, at any time, filter the invoices that are displayed to see only either paid ones or overdue ones, etc. They can search and find the invoices that they're looking for. Obviously, they can manage their invoice from this dashboard. Okay, I want to show you what the invoice looks like from a customer's perspective. So what we're going to do is, instead of going into my email account, I'm just going to click on this invoice that we just sent. And right here in the top right corner, I have these three little dots, which allows me to do things like editing the invoice, paying on behalf of the customer. So as the merchant, if I want to just enter the customer's credit card and pay over the invoice on their behalf, I can do that. I can resend, I can duplicate, meaning create a copy of this invoice. I can cancel it, which means disable the link. I can print it. What we're looking for today is just simply copy the link because I want to show you what this looks like from a customer's perspective. So we're going to go ahead and click on that and then add that as a new tab here. And here is the invoice that we sent. I've got my product, my line items, I've got my totals, here are my terms. And one of the things which is noteworthy is that the invoice feature, like all of the gateways, supports both compliant surcharging and dual pricing or non-compliant, different models with fees or surcharges. This account specifically, I set up to be compliantly surcharging. So you'll notice that there's specific verbiage over here that says that on credit card transactions is going to be a 3% fee. I've set it up in a way that on ACH, I have a set dollar amount as a fee. It could be a percentage. I've set it as a set dollar amount of $250, but those settings are customizable. And we're going to come down over here to the payment method section where I can pay via card, ACH, or Google Pay. The gateway supports both Google Pay and Apple Pay. I'm not an Apple device, so you're not going to see Apple Pay, but those options are available by default. And on the card section, you can see that my payment amount is $204.84. However, if I put in a debit card, because this is set up as compliant surcharging, if I put in a debit card, you're going to see that amount change to not reflect the 3% fee. So we're going to go ahead over here and just enter my card number, and you can see that changed to $198.87. It was 2 something before. It became $198.87 because the system is recognizing as a debit card, not a credit card, and therefore it is not applying that 3% fee. Again, customizable. You can have it apply both on credit and debit as dual pricing. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Let me just sign this invoice. I hope you're all impressed with that signature, with that art. We're going to go ahead and pay that, and we'll get an approved message. We paid off that invoice. Of course, just to point out, it says powered by Accept Blue. Your merchants never see that. They see your brand. However you branded your reseller account, it's going to have your ISO's logo, your brand. Just to show you quickly what an invoice looks like with dual pricing, I created one before the webinar, so I'm going to scroll down over here. You can see this is a dual pricing invoice. It's got pay by card 183, pay by check 177. So it's got those two prices side by side, and that card fee is applied both to debit and credit because it's not compliantly surcharging, it's dual pricing. So we apply it to all cards, and then we apply a different price to check. Okay, so far we covered creating an invoice, sending an invoice, and what the invoice looks like from a customer's perspective. Let's go back into the gateway account because there's a couple of things I need to show you in terms of configurations and settings of invoices, and then we need to look at products quickly as well. So we're going to click on Control Panel next, and we're going to go to Invoice Settings. So this is where the merchant brands their invoices with their logo, their company information, and creates all defaults and settings related to invoicing. So I've got my logo, I've got my company information, and I've got things like invoice number, which is the number that invoices should start or incrementing from. I can have a default tax. I can have the AVS street and AVS zip required, which is how I have it in my account. And I can customize what that surcharge label should actually say. So it could say surcharge, it could say fee, it could say convenience fee. It's up to you how you want to label that. I've got my default terms and conditions like we've seen, and I can also template my email subject and body. Here's another section which is important, which not everybody is aware of, which is notification. So as the merchant, I can set up notifications that should be sent via email to my customer either before, after, and or on the due date of the invoice. This was my special little surprise for this webinar. So until now, we only had 5 or 10 days as available options. We've added, in honor of today, an option to have a custom amount of days in terms of notification. So if I want my customer to be reminded 19 days before the due date, I can do that. I don't know why specifically I would choose 19, but if I do, that's what I would want. That's what I can do. So I can put 19 and 19, and then I can leave it checked off as on the due date as well. So my customer, if they get an invoice from me, will be reminded 19 days before the due date, 19 days after, as well as on the due date. Finally, I can have a default due date. So let's say 15. That means every time I create an invoice, the default due date will be 15 days from the creation of that invoice. So this is an important page. This is actually where the merchant should be coming to first before they actually send out an invoice. Let them brand their invoice, set up their settings, configurations, and defaults, and then they could go ahead and send out those invoices. Okay, so we looked at the invoice part. We've looked at the invoice settings. What the last thing we have to take a look at is products. So you've seen that when I created the invoice, all I had to do is choose products from my categories. I had them all prepared there with the names, the descriptions, the prices. The way to actually do that is to come here to the invoice dashboard and then click on products. Within products, you have your list of categories that you created and your list of products. To create a new product, you click on new product and then you put in a product name. We're not going to go ahead and create a product now. We're going to save ourselves the time, but you fill out as much details as you want. The only things you must fill out is a name and a product price. That is required, and then you can create that product. Another thing that I'm sure many people have missed is the option to have a minimum quantity for order. If you have something that gets sold in packs of 5 or in shipments of 10, you can say that for a specific product, my minimum is 10. So every time I add that product in invoice, 10 is the automatic default quantity. Okay, that's one cool thing. Another thing over here is the quantity. So if, let's say, a merchant is selling a specific product and they only have 30 of them, what they can do is put in 30, and then when they send out invoices that have 30 products in it, if they send out 30 invoices, each of them with one of these products, the system will not allow them to add this product to subsequent invoices. It'll show as sold out because you put the max as 30 and you already sold 30. Sold meaning you sent out invoices for 30 of this product. So we're going to show it as sold out. You can't sell anymore unless you come here and edit the product quantity amount. If you have an unlimited amount of a quantity, or in case of services, you just click on unlimited. That's the default, and then we'll never show you the product as being sold out. So this is where I can have all my products, each one with their category, subcategory, which makes it much easier for me when I go ahead and create an invoice, because then I could just choose from those products. Okay, we covered a lot. I know I did give that upfront warning that this is going to be a little bit intense. The idea over here is really to be just educational without any fluff. So I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. I'm not, I've got all the time now, so I'll try to answer as many as I can, but that's it for the actual demo. Let me stop my share here and I can focus on those questions and answers. So I've got some questions about sending reminders. We covered that. We saw that there's an option to send notifications before, on, or after a due date. So you have a maximum of 3 reminders for every invoice that's sent. There's another question about if the invoice isn't paid within a certain amount of time, can a fee be automatically applied to that invoice? That isn't a feature we currently support. It is on our future roadmap. We do see a lot of value in that, but it's not something that's available today. There's a question about line item prices show more than 2 numbers after the decimal point. That's just how I set up my own product. It doesn't have to show that. Typical products just have 2 decimal points. There's a question how long an authorization holds until it expires. So that's customizable within the gateway in control panel batch settings. You can have anywhere from 1 to 30 days as to how long an authorization should sit before it'll automatically expire. Keep in mind, for a lot of merchants, they're going to cap out at 5 or 7 days before their transactions start downgrading. We give you up to 30 because there are certain industries that allow up to 30, but make sure you have that setting in a way that it doesn't downgrade those transactions. There's a question about products working with the process transaction tab. The answer is no. Products is specifically an invoice feature. So it allows you to add those products to invoices, but on the processing transaction page where you run typical transactions, products will not be available. That's not where we add products. There's a question about batch importing items. So I'm just going to elaborate on the question to make sure people understand. If a merchant has many products that they want to import, there's no way within the gateway to import that. But if your merchant does have a mass amount of products, reach out to our support team. We'll give you a template and we'll be happy to do it from the back end to upload those items. There is no feature on estimates. There's no estimate feature. There's a question about, does a merchant need to have ACH enabled to be on dual pricing? The answer to that is usually yes. So dual pricing in its definition means that there's 2 two options. There's a payment method with a fee, payment method without a fee. Typically, the way it's done in card not present environments like a gateway or invoicing is card versus ACH or card versus check. We've seen people do credit card versus debit, and our system supports that. But the typical dual pricing setup will be card versus check versus ACH. Let's see, there's a couple on dual pricing. There's a question about notification when an invoice is paid. Yes, every time a transaction is run through the gateway, regardless if it's through the regular process transaction page or through an invoice, the merchant does get a notification via email that a transaction was done. That's completely customizable, which emails should get those notifications, which notifications should be sent. But the short answer to that is yes. Merchants that already have Accept Blue gateway accounts from a long time ago, do they automatically get updates like the one I showed you today? Absolutely. Every time we update the gateway, which we're doing all the time, new features, new functionality, that applies to all users of the platform. Doesn't matter when they came on board. There's a question about sending a link, but not through the gateway. So when we sent the invoice, we sent it via the gateway, email and text messaging. Like I showed, just copy that link and then the merchant can send it using their own methods. They don't have to send it through the gateway's built-in email and texting functionality. Google and Apple Pay will only show when the invoice is open on their respective devices. Yes, if it's on an Apple device, they'll see Apple Pay. If it's not, they won't see Apple Pay. Exactly. There's no limit to how many items you can have. It's the inventory management system that we looked at is not meant to replace a full-fledged POS system. It's not really meant to be a inventory management system for a liquor store or something like that. But technically, there is no limit to the items. Once an invoice is paid by a customer, what the merchant can do is log into their gateway account and under reports, find that transaction that was done and then save that card for the future. So it's a great way to save those cards is send an invoice to the customer. Once the customer pays and you have that transaction, you log into reports, click on that transaction, and then save payment method will be an option there, and that's going to get saved to the customer vault. Something I want to point out based on a couple of questions over here is when we created the invoice, I showed you that you can require a certain percentage or a set dollar amount as that first payment. So if it's $100, I can require 50% or $50 of that as the first payment. The system allows you to split it up into 2 payments maximum. So that initial payment, and then you can send out the invoice, the second invoice, the final invoice, requesting the remainder of the amount. Not more than 2 payments. 2 payments max, split into two payments. A couple of questions about QuickBooks integration, so going to spend a minute on that. We're going to have a separate know-it-all session discussing QuickBooks merchants. We definitely have some very good solutions for those merchants, but that is completely disconnected from the invoice tool that we've seen today. So the invoice feature that we looked at right now is a native gateway feature. It does not connect or speak or sync or integrate in any way to QuickBooks. It's not going to show up in QuickBooks. What you do in QuickBooks won't show up in this invoicing tool. It's a standalone invoice feature. Like I said, you have merchants using QuickBooks. We have many great solutions for them. Reach out to us. We're happy to tell you. We're going to have a separate session on that, but that's not related to the invoicing tool that we've seen today. Let's see. There's a question about permission levels for employees. Yeah, it's not really related to what we've seen today specifically, but you can give different merchant users different access. So you can have users that are able to do everything in the gateway. You can have users that are limited to using the process transaction tab or running a sale. It gets very, very granular in terms of permissions. You'd access that via control panel, user settings, or user management, and you'd be able to create those different access levels. There's a couple of more that I want to get to. Give me a minute so I go through the duplicates. There's an idea here that I want to give from one of the users. Thank you, NS, for the idea. She says that what she advises her merchants with QuickBooks is to take their QuickBooks invoice and just attach it as using the add attachment feature in the invoicing tool that we looked at, and then the customer sees that QuickBooks invoice, that PDF. It's an option if they don't need that full integration that we have for QuickBooks. That's a great idea. Thank you for sending that over. No deposits, meaning the invoice tool doesn't take a deposit and then send it back once a payment is made. Doesn't work like that. You can split a payment for card and ACH, meaning if you have an invoice for $100 and you send it to a customer and you only require 50% of that, then the first payment could be done via card and then the second payment could be done via ACH. That's totally fine. They can choose different payment methods per transaction. A couple of questions about recurring. Invoices right now does not contain a recurring element. We have a separate recurring billing feature in the gateway where you can set up customizable schedules to bill customers on a recurring schedule. But so far, the invoicing tool that we have right now doesn't have a recurring element. It is adding a recurring element to invoicing is actually on a short-term roadmap. So you will be seeing that in the near future, but not supported as of today. I think we covered pretty much most of it. I see there's some overlap with different questions. I'm not going to go through those again. The gateway is mobile friendly. There's maybe the last question over here. The gateway is mobile friendly. So if you send out an invoice, the customers are on their phone. They'll see the invoice in a way that makes sense for a mobile. It'll display differently than what we've seen today on a PC. So people should definitely feel free sending it out to phones. And I think that is it for now. So thank you again, everybody that joined. I highly recommend joining the future sessions. I think this is really gonna help you be a better seller, a better supporter, a better merchant service provider. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. If there's any questions that we didn't cover, any information that you'd like to have, if you'd like to have a one-on-one demo, we're more than happy to train our resellers, to educate our resellers. It's something that we're not only happy to do, but we think it goes a really long way in the success of our ISOs. Have yourselves all a wonderful weekend, a wonderful holiday season, and I'll be talking to you soon.